Okay, folks, we are now recording. So I'm obliged to read out the following to you as this is the first recording of a class on this program, the Higher Cert in Real Estate. I've already introduced myself and explained to you how today is going to work. And when we record through Microsoft Teams, you get a banner at the top of your screen to advise you that the class is being recorded. By staying on the recording, you are consenting to TU Dublin to use the recording and any information on the recording, including any way that you interact with the recording in a distribution to the class. For example, we'll put this recording up on Microsoft Stream and share it with the class, and on an unlisted YouTube link and share it with the class. If you do not consent to that, you should now leave the recording. And bear in mind that this is the first recording, so we will not say this at the start of every recording, but every time you do see the recording from this class, from this lecture, or from any lecturer on this program, you are consenting to what I've just explained. So I'll give you 5-6 seconds for anybody to withdraw if you do not wish to stay on this class or in this course as a result of the recording. Just one student had mentioned that she can't hear me. If for any reason you can't hear, or can one person reply just to say you can hear me? If you can hear me, just type into the chat box to say, yes, I can hear you. Great. Okay, thank you, folks. So maybe it was just an issue for that one student who couldn't hear. If for any reason there's any technology issues, the simplest way of resolving them is to leave the meeting and rejoining as it resets things for Microsoft Teams. So we are now recording, and I have already given you a brief introduction. So here's the formal introduction for the virtual orientation. You're very welcome to Technological University Dublin. TU Dublin is Ireland's first technological university, and it's formed from the merger of what was the old DIT, Dublin Institute of Technology, spread out across the city of Dublin, and the older IT Tala in the southwest of Dublin, and IT Blanchardstown in the northwest of Dublin. So folks, can we ensure your microphones are off? We're now recording, so I don't want to disrupt the recording for students. Can you ensure everybody your microphones are off so there's no feedback, please, and your cameras also? TU Dublin was Ireland's first technological university, and as of last year, based on student numbers, it's Ireland's largest university. Our focus is on university quality education on an international standard, but primarily focused on the technology and practical skills. This course, the Higher Certificate in Real Estate, is based on the Tala campus of TU Dublin. Again, we have three main venues of campuses: Tala in the southwest of Dublin, Blanchardstown in the west of Dublin, and there's various buildings in the city, including the main building, Grange Gorman, just inside the city centre. The Higher Certificate in Real Estate is a 2-year level 6 qualification on the National Framework of Qualifications. I'll explain to you later today what we mean by level 6. And my role is to be your mentor on the professional practice module and your lecturer on the critical skills module. And there's a difference in that. By lecturer and critical skills, which is a 1-semester module between now and Christmas, I'll be teaching you specific content, giving you assignments to do and grading them. That's just semester 1. It's a mandatory course, a mandatory module, and that's what we call our subjects in TU Dublin, modules. It's a mandatory module for every new student of the University of Tala campus. So the critical skills development module teaches you the skills you need to be a student. It'll outline to you, for example, how to write reports correctly, finding information, making sure you don't get accused of plagiarism, ensuring that there's no problems with putting your information together, structure, formal business English, etc. That's the written side. The spoken communication side and the interpersonal skills is also a core element of critical skills development. Time management, personal management, how to be a good student, how to study, prepare for exams, and what we mean by certain terminology in exam and assessment questions. How do the assessments work? How does the grading work? How to make the most of being a student and understand all the regulations so that you don't have any problems along the way. And things like group work and learning skills, all of which are covered in this module. Some of it is covered between today and next week, some of it via recordings that are sent to you, and some of it via readings that you do in your own time. So it's a mix of live recorded, pre-recorded, and self-directed learning, all of which we'll explain today. That's what I mean by lecturer, and that's different to professional practice mentor. In professional practice as a mentor, I'm not teaching you particularly anything. You teach yourself and you learn yourself by attending classes every Saturday over the 2 years, and indeed by engaging in work practice, either in the places where you're currently working, if it's a property related industry, or by getting work placement, virtual and physical, over the 2 years if you're not already working in the property sector. This is a requirement of the course to become a licensed professional that you must engage, and the professional practice module is worth 30 of the 120 credits, so a quarter of the marks of the 2 years on the course. It's time consuming, but it's not difficult. And in the first class today and in next week's classes, all of the information you need for the full 2 years of this course is front loaded to get you started on it. And then you learn the skills yourself over the 2 years, including by attending classes. When you see the skills or competencies, as I explained, you might think, well, we're not covering that until second year in one of the modules in second year. And it's designed that way, so you leave that competency aside until second year. I've already introduced myself and explained who I am, my current role, but there's my contact information if you wish to take a screenshot or indeed write it down. You'll always get a quicker reply to an email than to a voicemail. It's just the way we necessarily work in TU Dublin. So an email is always the best way to get hold of me. All college staff email for lecturers who are based in TU Dublin, their email is in the format first name dot last name at tudublin.ie. Please remember to spell the name correctly, otherwise it will bounce back. And I do realize I have an unusual non-Irish surname, so make sure the H comes before the T, which is the common error if somebody sends an email. It's pronounced meta as if the T comes before the H, but it's actually the other way around. So glenn.meta at tudublin.ie. You should also add that to your safe senders list so that any emails from me do not go into your spam folder. From next week onwards, we will only send emails once you're fully registered to your student email account. It is not possible once you're fully registered to use your personal emails. Student communication from the university goes to your student email only, which will be a very similar format to what you see there, except it's your student number, which begins with X00 at mytudublin.ie. So student emails are at mytudublin.ie, all of which will be explained to you next week when you get fully enrolled on all of our IT services. In the meantime, if you wish to email me from your personal email, you can, and that's my email address, so make a note of it. The telephone number there is a Dublin line. It's a virtual line, Microsoft Teams, so it means wherever I'm working, including remote working days, I can answer, but that's only active between 9 to 6, Monday to Friday. Once again, however, the quickest way to get a reply is to send an email to say, perhaps if you want to talk to me, please give me a call on the following number. And that way, by putting your number in the email, we have permission to call you. First classes. So you are required to attend today, and there's a lot of information coming your way. I'll apologize in advance. Breathe, make sure you have coffee. We will take breaks and you can digest it. But we do have a long day. We are scheduled till 5 o'clock. We will take breaks, and depending on how things work today, if we condense some of the breaks, we may finish a little bit earlier, and I can stay on then for those who may need some extra technology assistance. So we'll work on that. We'll talk about that today, but we're scheduled till 5 o'clock. Because we started an hour later than planned, I will stay on until 6 o'clock today for anybody who needs to. It's optional. And I'll set an hour aside as well. If nobody opts to stay between 5 and 6, I'll set an hour aside next week for a follow-up for anybody who has any questions, having digested the information or maybe had some technology problems and missed a little bit. And I'll send you details today before we finish up of what time next week and on the link as well. So it is required that you attend. by clicking on the link that you had already done and you're here. Attendance at the start is mandatory, and this is not, we're not TU Dublin being too strict about it. We understand that sometimes people have other events and things they have to attend, but being honest, if you miss today or next week, you really run the risk of failing the course because of the amount that is front loaded, particularly on professional practice, where the only classes for the 2 years are today and next week, and it's a quarter of the marks for the entire 2 years. If you miss them or any part of it, you really run a very strong risk of failing the course. And I'd have to strongly advise you not to start this year, but wait until next year when you can attend the first classes. So fair warning there, it's really, really important that you attend. The recordings, limited recordings you'll get from it, are simply not enough. You do need to attend classes. So you're at a severe disadvantage if you miss the first classes. The classes are set for today, 9:30 to 5, with breaks factored in. I'd suggest we take our lunch break at 1 o'clock. We'll have a coffee break between now and 1 o'clock at some point. And we'll take an afternoon coffee break as well, so you can stretch your legs. If you are joining virtually, please make sure to do so safe only. Don't be watching a screen if you're driving, looking at a smartphone, for example. That's obviously not acceptable. So join safely if you're joining virtually and you're out and about. Ideally, you're joining from a laptop or a PC from home or the office in a fixed position. You will need later on today in the class access to Microsoft Word for some of the tasks. You will need access to a device that has internet connection so you can access Google Chrome. And ideally, you'll have a pen and maybe a notepad beside you as well. The links that I had sent through Genevieve to you have some of the documents that we will be going through today and next week. So hopefully you have downloaded and saved them in a folder somewhere. And one of the first tasks should be to actually have a college folder and even some subfolders, as we'll explain today. Next Friday, our class is from 4 until 10 p.m. It'll be on a different Microsoft Teams link that I will share in the chat today before we finish up. 4 to 10 p.m. However, you do not have to join between 4 and 6 p.m. if everything from today went fine and you've no problems with the technology or no queries or follow-up questions or there's nothing that you really want to extra assistance or support with. If you particularly feel that you are inundated with queries yourself about how to do X, Y, Z, or you're having particular challenges with the technology, or you may find some of the upcoming technology difficult, or you're worried about work placement, or indeed you don't work in the property sector and you're worried about how to get the experience, then between 4 and 6 next Friday is for you. But the mandatory part next Friday is from 6 to 10 p.m. Conscious that many of you will be working until end of the business day, maybe 5:30. So from 6 to 10 p.m. next Friday is a mandatory element. Between 4 and 6 p.m. it's not mandatory, it's optional, but I'd encourage you to attend if you need any extra assistance or a one-on-one chat private. We can arrange that as well between 4 and 6 next Friday. Next Saturday, you will receive an email, if you haven't already done so, through Genevieve and IPAV about the on-campus orientation, which is also mandatory next Saturday. The on-campus orientation will take place in the Tallaght campus, and I will share in the chat the air code for the Tallaght campus for any of you who wish to find it and don't know how to find it. Through Google Maps, I'll just call it out now, but I will share it in the chat later on. It's in Dublin 24, just off the M50, 5 minutes off the M50. And the air code for the Tallaght campus is D24, F for Freddy, K for King, T for Tommy, 9. D24, FKT 9. That'll take you to the main campus in Tallaght. You may park anywhere on campus within white lines, which is free. There's free parking on the Tallaght campus. You may not park in any of the areas that require barrier access, or obviously the blue badge areas for those who have ability or disability access. So park anywhere on campus and go in through the main front door of the campus, and you will see Genevieve and Paul Campbell, the course coordinator, who will welcome you. As I understand it, time to be confirmed, but as I understand it, don't quote me on this because it's not confirmed yet. I believe you need to be there to register between 10 and 11. And I believe then you'll be split into 2 groups. Half of you will have an orientation between 11 and 1 with lunch at 1 to 2. And then back in from 2 to 4 with myself and Jerry for the technology setup and training and activation of all your accounts. The other half will do it in reverse. You'll be in 11 to 1 with myself and Jerry in the computer labs, and then you'll have the orientation from 2 to 4. So the classes next Saturday are for everybody, between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. with break at 1 o'clock for an hour. So 11 to 4 next Saturday the 10th with break from 1 to 2. But I understand you're going to be asked to come in between 10 and 11. I'm not sure the exact time. Watch for the email that comes out so that you can finalize your registration. It may be 10:30. Keep an eye on the email. But certainly I've been asked to be available between 11 and 4, and I'll be taking half the group between 11 and 1 with my colleague Jerry, and the other half the group between 2 and 4. And while those who are in the technology setup, you'll have an afternoon orientation, and for those in the morning orientation, you'll have an afternoon technology setup. We've quite a large class, nearly 100 of you in first year, so we do split it up into 2 for that reason. And Jerry and I will help you and assist you with all technology issues. If you have a device that you wish to connect to EduRoam, the TU Dublin free Wi-Fi service, it's actually a global education Wi-Fi service, and it works in many places around the world, certainly all over Ireland and most of Europe and America. For Wi-Fi, you simply open your device once you connect to EduRoam in any from TU Dublin EduRoam, and you get access to the EduRoam wherever it has it, anywhere in the world. Bring your device next week if you wish to have any help in being set up with EduRoam. That can be a smartphone, a pad, a laptop, whatever. But we'll be setting you up and enrolling you on our virtual learning environment through the PCs in our computer labs on campus in the Tala campus next week. If you're searching for TU Dublin on Google Maps and how to find it, if you're coming up from anywhere outside of Dublin perhaps and you don't know where it is, please be aware that we have very many buildings in TU Dublin and many locations, some of which are an hour apart. So TU Dublin City Centre is about 45 minutes drive from TU Dublin Tala, and TU Dublin Tala is about a 30-minute drive from TU Dublin Blanchardstown. So be careful of the one you choose in Google Maps, which is why I gave you the error code, and after this recording I'll type it into the chat box. So that's our classes today and next week. What we are due to do today is as follows. We have just completed our tests in Microsoft Teams while we were waiting for everybody to start at 10:30. And we've gone through the key online dynamics and etiquette, including keeping your microphone off and your camera off in lectures. And I've explained the recording issues. We've gone through some introductions. Every lecturer will give you an introduction of him or herself. It's really important that you attend online classes and virtual classes. Some of the modules that you have just 4 or 5 classes because they alternate every second week, for example. So if you miss one class, you could miss a quarter of the content for that module. And that means that you are restricting your ability and what you can answer in the January exams. Next week, if you haven't already received the timetable of which classes are on which Saturdays, you will receive that next week from Paul Campbell, your course coordinator, who will also be one of your lecturers, and or from Genevieve. And I believe Pat Davitt from IPAV will also be there to welcome you and talk to you. So if you haven't received your timetable already, you will get that next week, but you know it's every Saturday between now and Christmas. I believe except the bank holiday Saturday, but I could be wrong on that. The only Friday class is next Friday this semester, okay? As for class rules and online etiquette, the same rules and etiquette for all education apply, whether it's online or physically. So in a lecture, when the lecture takes place, recorded or not, online or physical, you don't interrupt the lecturer for any reason. You raise a hand if it's physically in class, and the lecturer will get to you as soon as they finish anything that they're covering in that on-campus class. Similarly, in an online dynamic, either raise your hand virtually or type into the chat box to say I have a question, and the lecturer will call on you when he or she finishes the topic that they are on or the point that they were on. Bearing in mind that we keep it respectful at all times as well, and we use the chat box only for class discussions, nothing inappropriate and no jokes, of course. Other on-campus, etiquette rules is important that I outline. We have very strict etiquette and behavioral rules that all students and all colleges have as well. It's a respect and a tolerant and an anti-discrimination campus in TU Dublin, and we take a zero tolerance approach to any behavioral issues that are contrary to, for example, equality, whether it's sexism or homophobia or racism or ability or any of the grounds of equality and diversity. So we have a zero tolerance approach, and the heads of the department get instantly involved if they hear anything or they have anything like that reported back to them. We just ask for respect for everybody, including between lecturers and staff as well. In the physical classes in TU Dublin, there's no food and drink permitted. There's also a range of COVID measures, as you can imagine, including all of the normal HSE rules. So while masks are not enforced on campus, we always encourage students and lecturers, if they wish to wear a mask to protect themselves, then it is a personal choice. But what we do enforce is the basic hygiene rules that we're all too familiar with because of COVID, and that's hand hygiene. You will find that there are hand wash stations all throughout the campus, and you will find that there's hand gel stations at every entrance and exit as well. There's also antiviral wipes in most rooms, and for those who wish to wipe down desks before you use them, please do so. We encourage you to follow, we ask you, it's required that you follow normal cough and sneeze etiquette. And again, guys, I know we're all used to this, having lived with COVID for as long as we have, but I'm obliged to remind you of this at the start. It is strictly forbidden under university rules to attend campus if you have symptoms of COVID-19, and TU Dublin will just ask you for like your diagnosis, for example, if you want to share with the lecturer or the tutor your positive test results, and that way you can privately share that with the lecturer or the tutor and say that I'm not going to come to class today because of that. But it's not possible to attend class with a physical class with any symptoms of COVID-19. I'm sure you realize why. Another advisory, again, just to formally read out that online classes may be recorded, and by staying online with any of these, you are given permission for your involvement in the online class to be recorded and to be shared. This class will be uploaded to Microsoft Stream, and a link of it as an unlisted link will be put on YouTube and shared to the class through YouTube, so you have access to it over the 2 years. That's the formalities out of the way that I'm obliged to tell you. And I always feel bad saying to what you are adult learners, the things like behavior, etc. But we have to say it, and I think you all understand why, that everybody is on the same page. One last thing I forgot: in physical classes, mobile phones must be on silent, not vibrate. And if a lecturer does ask you to leave a room for any reason for disruption, they will ask you to leave. And any students who do disrupt the lecture are asked to leave, out of fairness to all of the students in the class. Let's move on to the introduction of what you're going to cover in the 2 modules that I'm involved in. Firstly, critical skills, CSD as it's abbreviated to. The critical skills development module, sometimes abbreviated to its older name, Learning to Learn, is this semester only, semester 1 between now and Christmas. It accounts for 5 credits of the 120 credits of your course. It's a mandatory element of the course, and it prepares you, as I said, to get ready for how to be a student, how to write, how to research, how to present, how to manage your time effectively, how to manage stress, how to work in groups, and how to understand how our assessments and grading works, and also, crucially, what plagiarism is. TU Dublin takes a really strict approach to plagiarism. For example, copying and pasting from the web and using that in your reports incorrectly, or getting someone else to do your work for you. It's a particularly strict approach we have in TU Dublin, with a minimum sanction of a fail, and you have to do the module or the exam again, and maximum sanctions can be up to expulsion, and there can be legal issues involved as well if you use someone else's material without their permission. Not to scare you off, but we do take it extremely seriously, and in this module, I'll be showing you between today and next week how to effectively still use material online, even copy and paste, once you cite and reference it correctly using quote marks and the owner of the material, the author's name, as a citation, and a reference at the end in the bibliography and reference section. It's a requirement that I show you how to do this, and once I show you how to do this, then you cannot say that I didn't know. And if you do copy and paste without permission, it is a very serious academic offense if you don't follow the Harvard Referencing Convention, which I'll explain to you in detail. You also received a handout sent via email from me through Genevieve to you called the Writing Style Guide. You're obliged to read that in its entirety, and we will be going through it as well, and follow those rules for every assignment for the full 2 years here in TU Dublin, because it explains to you how to not get accused of plagiarism by following the Harvard Referencing Convention. For those of you who have studied in other colleges or universities throughout Ireland or the world, you'll be well used to this. You know what this is. You know a lot of the material we're going to be covering in the critical skills module. For those of you who have finished a college course, pay very close attention to this now, because this could be a big time saver for some of you. For those of you who have finished a college course at university level to degree level 7 or higher, here in Ireland or Europe or elsewhere, in the last 5 years only, so between June 2017, the end of that academic year, and now, you can apply for an exemption from this module, critical skills. To be clear, there's no exemptions in professional practice for anybody. It's a mandatory module. But for those of you who have finished a college course at 3rd level, at level 7 degree or higher, degree at level 7, honours degree level 8, master's level 9, PhD level 10, from Ireland or elsewhere, and can prove that they have graduated at level 7 or higher in the last 5 years only, later than June 2017, you can apply not to do the assessments in this module, critical skills development, and instead of doing the assessments, you get a grade called X, which means you're exempt from doing it by virtue of the fact that you have got a university or college qualification in the last 5 years. There's no exemption from attending the content today and next week, and you'll still receive all the material as a refresher, but the assignments that come with it, which will be explained today and next week, you can apply for an exemption from that. I will explain later how to do that, and if for any reason I forget, can somebody remind me at the end of today, and I'll explain the process. This module has 5 credits, but there are no exams. It is 100% what we call CA, Critical Skills Continuous Assessment, CA. You'll get used to our abbreviations in TU Dublin. One thing that's never abbreviated is the name Dublin. It's always TU Dublin, we're never TUD. If you're updating on LinkedIn that you're now a student of TU Dublin, we're not TUD. It's part of a branding, a global branding identity that the word Dublin is never abbreviated. So TU Dublin, not TUD. But CSD we use for the module Critical Skills Development, and to save time, I'm going to use that from here on in. You'll hear the word CA, the abbreviation CA, always used in our university for continuous assessment. A CA is a way of building marks throughout the semester. You'll never walk into an exam in TU Dublin in January or the May exams where that exam accounts for 100%. Our philosophy is that the minimum marks you will collect throughout the semester through CA is minimum 30%. So you'll always have less pressure walking into the exam. So remember the Leaving Cert where so much was riding on that 3-hour English paper 2, for example, 2 years work. That's not our philosophy in TU Dublin. You build marks throughout the semester through CA, and then the exams make up maximum 70% in an exam. For this module, CSD, there's no exam. It's work all throughout the semester. Report, presentation, reflections, quizzes, all of which will be explained. And don't panic when you hear the word presentation. Given that this is an online class, we're going to accept a one-on-one virtual presentation. So you don't, for this module, this semester, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm told otherwise, you will not have to stand up in front of the class and deliver a presentation. You do it online simply with me, and it's 5 minutes. So for anybody who is instantly panicking around presentation, don't. This is all front-loaded critical skills and professional practice. With the critical skills module, however, there's only so much we'll get through in the front-loaded content today and next Friday. That's why after that, I'll be sending you some recordings to watch in your own time and some readings to read in your own time. instead of attending class. There's simply not enough Saturdays in the year to do all of the content we need to do. And the other option was to bring you in on some Sundays. And obviously you need to have at least one down day if you're working 5 days during the week and attending these classes every Saturday. So because there's not enough Saturdays between now and Christmas to cover all the content, even starting so early in September, we do send you some material to do in your own time, to watch in your own time. And with any queries on that, you then contact us by email or through Moodle and you engage with us. So that's what we mean by front loaded. And the rest of the content is either virtual and the support is virtual through telephone, through Moodle, through chat on Teams, for example, and by email. There is a presentation, as I said, but it's going to be a virtual one. And during COVID, we learned that when we had to put this class fully online, that it worked fine. And the virtual presentation was a couple of different options, as we'll explain. One was a self-recorded presentation, where somebody took your smartphone and recorded you delivering a 5-minute presentation to the camera, to someone holding your smartphone camera, and you send it via WhatsApp to a number that I'll give you. Or it can be through Teams and uploaded through OneDrive, or indeed live. There's lots of options, but given the handiness of WhatsApp, I think last year 95% of the class opted to simply have someone record their presentation through WhatsApp and send it to me, and that worked absolutely fine. Before the pandemic, we used to do it on a separate day on campus, and every student delivered a 5-minute presentation either to the class or to me. And we learned through the pandemic, well, to save a Saturday to devote to other classes, we can now do this in a virtual environment, and through WhatsApp worked absolutely fine. I'll talk to you more about that next week. This class from Critical Skills that's front loaded has mandatory attendance, as I said. Okay, we are going to take a coffee break in about 10-15 minutes, but pay very close attention to this next bit, please, because I'm going to introduce 2 years worth of work in professional practice. Then I'll let you digest it over the coffee break, and we'll take questions after the coffee break. So give me your full undivided attention for the next 10 minutes as we set up this module for 2 years. Professional practice is exactly as the name suggests. It is the practices needed to be a professional in the property sector. TU Dublin and IPAV, taking information from the Property Services Regulatory Authority, the property regulator, have developed a list of 55 core and elective skills that are needed to be a licensed professional. Many of these are developed throughout your time on this course. Every Saturday's classes over 2 years. But many of them you can't get from the course alone. You need to have placement by working with a real licensed property professional. Some of you already work in the property sector, in which case the place you're working, you can observe a licensed professional on how he or she does certain things, and then you document and discuss how you would do it when you're a licensed professional in the future. Because remember, under the law and the regulations, it's illegal to do certain things unless you're a licensed professional. So you would never do that, obviously, unless you're a licensed professional. But you may watch somebody in your office who is a licensed professional on how he or she values a property. For example, how he or she manages the deposit for a rental, how he or she deals with a letter of engagement, how he or she comes up with a daft.ie ad and puts it up on daft.ie or a window display, etc. You observe them, you shadow them. This is what we call work placement or work shadowing. And then you write up about, well, here's what I've learned, and here's what I will do in the future when I am a licensed professional based on these learnings. And by the way, you need evidence for each one. So here's the evidence. I worked with the licensed professional on developing this window display, and here is the window display that we developed. And you upload a PDF of that window display as your evidence. There are 55 different ones, competencies. And over the 2 years of this course, you need to develop almost all of them. The minimum to pass is 33. I sent a document to you via email through Genevieve via email called Professional Practice 1 and 2, and it is the full document outlining all of the requirements of the module for 2 years. with all 55 skills, which we will go through today, later, after lunch most likely, and I'll give you examples on each of the 55 skills on what you might actually write. So have your pens to the ready or have that document open after lunch to be able to take notes in Microsoft Word, because I'm going to help you get started. And by the way, we're going to write our first one today together after lunch, and I'm going to help you with that. And if you don't work in property right now, you might think, how the hell am I going to do this? I have no knowledge in property. Some in the class work in the property sector, some don't. For those who don't work in the property sector, don't worry, we will help you and assist you and guide you as best as we can. The classes at the weekends and Saturdays will develop these skills, but you will need to engage with work practice or work placement, whether that is some days or taking some leave from your regular job, maybe a week, a semester, and actually working with somebody in the property sector. Maybe you only need a day or two a semester. And as well as that, Genevieve and IPAV has kindly arranged in the past, because of the pandemic, a licensed professional who's a graduate of this course to deliver a couple of hours here and there virtually through Microsoft Teams or Zoom, explaining some of the core property skills, which you can then follow along in the class that Genevieve organizes, usually during the day, midweek, and listen to that individual explaining how she does what she does as a licensed professional. That's work placement. During the pandemic, we learned quite a lot about how to do certain things, including this module. So if you have somebody in mind that is a licensed professional that you're not working with at the moment, maybe you work in the bank right now, but your cousin works in the property sector, you could actually have coffee with your cousin regularly and go through these skills, and he or she could guide you and say, well, this is how I do it. You could also have regular telephone calls, Zoom chats, WhatsApp chats with somebody who's a licensed professional. So it all doesn't have to be physical. And indeed, because of the pandemic, we've learned that we will accept virtual placement as well through things like Zoom, you engaging with the property professional through Zoom or Teams or WhatsApp, telephone, or whatever the case is. We also have to be cognizant of the fact we are moving into a winter. And while we're hopeful there's not another perhaps wave of COVID, and we're very hopeful there's no other lockdowns, we have to be flexible in our approach to our delivery and of course to this module. So while you may plan to have physical work placement, always have a fallback in case it has to go virtual. And who knows, God forbid you have to self-isolate because of COVID or close contact or anything else. It's always a good idea to have a fallback to do things virtually. And I think we've all learned that over the last couple of years with the pandemic. More will be explained about placement as we go through it after lunch. So I'm just explaining to you what's needed, what we mean by that. Over the 2 years, you develop these skills in your own time. Having had them explained to you today after lunch when I go through each of the 55 of them, and we will record it as well, but you really need to be there to take notes. When I explain each of the 55, you need to start highlighting yourself which ones you think you can start on. 33 of them are the minimum to pass over the 2 years, to get a bare 40%, by the way. So the more you do, the better you do them. Obviously, the higher your grade. You could start, we will start today on one. We are going to work on one together, whether you've worked in the property sector or not. And we're going to start on a communications one, because whether you've worked in the property sector or not, you've all communicated with somebody, haven't you? Of course you have. So good communications in the workplace, for example, is one of the competencies to develop in box number 2. That's a very generic one. And you can talk about it from your work in the bank or your work in construction or your work in Tesco's. It does not have to be always linked to property for the generic elective skills like communication. What you do need to do, however, is say, you're talking about your communication skills, for example, and how you've improved them by reading a certain book, watching a TED Talks on communication, or whatever the case is. You do need to say, when you are a property professional, licensed property professional in the future, how would you put this into practice when you're engaging with clients, for example, in the property sector? So while it's a generic communication skills, which you can talk about developing from any sector of the economy, you always have to have an eye on property and say, in the future, how will this benefit me when I am a licensed professional? You need to show you've evidence, for example, of improving your communication skills. That evidence could be the book that you read on how to give a killer presentation, or winning eye contact in interviews, or how to negotiate well, the TED Talks you watched. And the evidence could be a link to Amazon Books where you downloaded that book, or the actual photograph of the book cover that you bought in Eason's, or indeed the link to that TED Talks link on YouTube where you watch that TED Talks on how to be a better communicator. That's the evidence. Doesn't need to be rocket science. A link is good enough. An uploaded image is good enough of a book cover, for example. How does TU Dublin know that you read that book and you didn't just walk into Eason's and take a photograph of the book cover? We don't. We're trusting you as a mature, as an academic student, an adult learner, that you're, by saying that you've read it or a chapter in it, and by discussing that, you are claiming that you have. And we usually know by the discussion if you have or haven't. Does it mean you have to read the whole book? Of course not. There's an element of the book perhaps that you can dip in and out of that helps you understand, for example, better communication skills in negotiations. I've picked communications as a generic skill because we can all get on board with that, and we'll start on that one today after lunch and work on it together. This module is not only crucial, it is a mandatory element with no exemptions. It runs over 2 years. It documents your development, your professional development over the 2 years using a tool called Student Diary Pro, which is built into Moodle, our virtual learning environment. You'll be trained on that on campus next Saturday. I will show you virtually today and next Friday, but we'll physically get you enrolled on it when you're fully enrolled in all our systems. Professional practice we'll abbreviate to PP1 and PP2. You'll love all our abbreviations in TU Dublin. And that's what I'm going to call it from here on in. PP1 is the first year version, PP2 the second year version. PP1 runs between now and next May, 15 credits. PP2 between next September and the following May of second year, 15 credits. Almost all of your other modules are worth 5 credits. So this module is worth 6 times the credits, therefore 6 times the marks and weighting of any of your other modules. This is going to be a bit confusing for you because after today and next week, you don't have regular classes with me on this. And you're going to start focusing on the classes that you do have regular weekly contact and the assignments coming from them. And you may forget a little bit about this one. And that's a big mistake. Just because there's no regular classes doesn't mean you don't engage. So there's no lectures. There'll be some recordings sent to you, but there is regular emails. You'll get sick of these from me. I'll apologize in advance. They're long. You'll roll your eyes and go, there's another long email from Glenn waffling on. You have to read them, guys. It's instead of having Sunday classes. And they can be long emails. There's detail in there you have to follow. That's instead of regular classes on this. There's a lot of info that's going to be up on the Moodle site, the virtual learning environment. There's recordings that will be sent to you and regular emails with requirements. And you will then discuss throughout the months, you'll develop your skills and you will need to document them and submit them through Moodle Student Diary Pro at the end of each month. So regular work is required. It can't be left till the end. I've put this in big red writing because of how important it is. To reiterate, just because there's no weekly classes in this module like your other classes doesn't mean that it's any less work or less important than you're on the course. It's the opposite. It's worth 6 times the credits of any other module. So you can't just put it aside. It's one that you develop and work on regularly. It requires a really large amount of work in your own time every single month, and you can't pass the course without doing well in this. Don't get scared with this, because I'm going to explain what we mean by 660 hours. Work placement, if you don't already work in this sector, is a vital element of this module. If you work in property, you're already working in it, you're exposed to the property sector, you don't need to find someone that you can shadow. If you don't work in the property sector, you will need work placement, virtual or physical, or both. And I'm going to show you a form later this afternoon that you can fill in, send on to Genevieve before the last day of September. and Genevieve and IPAV will do their best to try and find you a licensed professional, either in the area you live or work, so it's convenient, that can be a mentor over the 2 years for your work placement. You may know somebody, an aunt or cousin or a friend or a friend of a friend who works in the property sector that you can shadow and get information from. Shadowing means either physically turning up, maybe a day a month or a week a year or something like that, and shadowing them and going out with them when they meet clients and they value houses and they develop window displays and other things, and seeing how they do it and then writing up about it. So this is your learning. Or shadowing could involve telephone calls, Teams, Zoom calls, or attending some of the virtual shadowing that Genevieve will organise with our colleague Niamh, who's a licensed professional, usually once a semester during the week, usually a morning during the week. That's virtual placement that we put in place during the pandemic and hopefully will continue. Ultimately, however, this is important, you're responsible for organising your own placement and it needs to be finalised by the end of September. So now we're on the 3rd of September. You have the whole month of September to find someone who will be your placement or your mentor. If you currently work in the sector, it's just having a chat with your boss or your colleagues to say, you're a licensed professional, can you devote a couple of hours a week to me to actually showing me some of the skills I need? I have a list of skills that Glenn has showed me, skills or competencies. I need to devote some time each week to developing them and watching how you do it as a licensed professional and using some blank templates with no names or addresses on them as your evidence. And usually the person in your office in the property sector will be happy to do so. Perhaps they were on this course in the past themselves, so they know. If you are working in the sector, you will need to identify a certain amount of time per week. Could be every Friday afternoon, for example, from 2 to 5, that you devote to developing your skills. You'll be asked in early November to list and detail the days and times that you have spent engaging with the mentor from work placement, and the name of that person, the name of the practice, the name of the actual property organization, their telephone, their email, and again, the days and times. So you need to keep a diary and list when you have engaged. That could be, for example, those of you who work in the sector, you block off every Friday from 2 to 5. For those who don't work in the sector, you end up, every Wednesday evening or every alternate Wednesday or something like that. You engage with somebody who's a licensed professional and they help you develop your skills. Keep a record of the days and times. You'll be asked in November and in February by TU Dublin, on behalf of IPAV and TU Dublin, to fill in a form outlining the days and times, because we need to see that you are doing this. During the pandemic, we learned to do it online as well, as I said, and we will accept that. You still fill in the days and times, whether it's online or by telephone or Teams or Zoom or physical. Here's the bit that usually makes everybody run for the hills, and I don't want you to do that because I'm going to explain that it's not really 660 hours of placement. So please don't panic when you see this. The requirement, as linked with the property regulator, IPAV and TU Dublin, is that over the 2 years, you will spend 660 hours developing the competencies for this module. That's a lot. Let's break it down. And I promise you in the next 2-3 minutes, you won't feel as panicked. So listen really carefully and try to infer from what I'm implying as well, and listen to the hints I'm giving you here. In first year, you must state that you've spent at least 330 hours developing these competencies, and in second year, the same 330 hours. But that includes all engagement with developing these competencies. Let's break it down further. Every Saturday, you attend class. Let's say the classes are 9 to 5. That's 8 hours, including your lunch break, because whether you're on campus, physically talking to classmates about property, because that's what you're going to do for your 1 hour lunch break, isn't it? Or online, where during your lunch break, you're having your sandwich and you're actually reading up on some of the property related stuff. Of course you are. There's 8 hours every week. 12 weeks in the semester. It's 100 hours between now and Christmas. Next semester is another 12-week semester. You're up to 200 hours of just class and break time within class, where you are spending your breaks on talking about with classmates property related skills and developing your skills. Now imagine you're also attending placement, or every Friday in the practice that you're working, every Friday 3 to 5, 2 to 5, 3 hours a week, every week of the year, 50 weeks of the year, maybe 45 at holidays taken out or whatever. There is what, another 150 hours? Every Sunday morning, you'd probably take the property pages and sit in Costa for 2 hours, wouldn't you? Of course you would. That's developing your skills. Let's say you commute an hour. Dublin traffic's terrible. I'm joining from Wexford. I'm a Dub, but one of the reasons I left Dublin is Dublin traffic. It's terrible, of course. But even Wexford traffic to Dublin is not great. I use my hour and 5-minute commute to the campus from Wexford to listen to podcasts. Not always radio, not Spotify, not always News Talk or Lyric or whatever. Podcasts to upskill myself in certain areas. You do the same, don't you? Your 1 hour commute to work, whether it's a drive, a train, a Lewis, a bus, you've got your earpods in and you're listening to podcasts. You're not watching videos when you're driving, of course you're not. But if you're on the train to college, you may be watching TED Talks. If you do that for every commute, maybe half hour in and out of the city, if you live in the suburbs of Dublin, it's an hour a day, 5 days a week. There's 5 hours a week on watching or listening to podcasts related to property. Suddenly you're on about 400 hours in the year. So please get what I'm hinting at. Please understand what I'm saying. Your break time in work, your commutes to work, your breaks in the college course, let alone every Saturday. And what about all the studying you're going to do for your January exams? The hours that you're going to be putting into the studying for that and the May exams and your assignments and the informal networks that you set up. Let's say there's 5 or 6 of you over in Galway on this course, but you're joining from Galway. You decide to meet, in Galway once a month and talk about the assignments or work and group stuff together on a Sunday. Those 8 hours, that's counted. Suddenly, you actually have no problem hitting 330 hours. To be really clear, nobody is asking you to get 330 hours of work experience placement. That is not what we're looking for. Development of these skills for the 330 hours minimum over the year, per year, 330 hours in each year, includes every Saturday's class. You're listening to podcasts on your commute to work or commute to the college on Saturday, your break time discussions, your informal study networks, your study for the classes, your assignments for the classes, your readings for the classes, your upskilling in property in general, reading the property newspapers, watching TED Talks on YouTube, and all of your study for exams. We've never had a student who had difficulty reaching 330 hours per year. However, if by the submission, which is in May, of your final submission piece of work, you don't write 330 hours on the cover of your submission, it's an automatic fail. You have to claim, self-claimed, that you spent more than 330 hours, minimum 330 per year in developing these skills. How do we know you did? Well, we know the workload of the Saturday classes. We know how much it takes to study and do the assignments. And that's, when you add all that together, you're not far off, maybe 250, 260 hours. We can tell then from your discussions in your writing up on the competencies how much time you've put in for the balance. And your evidence, you're saying you read a chapter of this book. Well, unless you're a speed reader, it may take you a couple of hours to read a particular chapter, or you watch a 1 hour TED Talks. Well, there's your hour. Your evidence, your proof that you did this, as I mentioned, your link to that TED Talks, which is a 1 hour talk on YouTube on negotiation skills, your photograph of the book cover, or your link to Amazon Books where you downloaded that book on Kindle, for example, or through your library, and the book cover, a photograph of that is enough to prove that you maybe spent an hour or two reading that chapter, or 5 or 6 hours reading that book. So I did say to you, when you see 660 hours, most people panic. But after I've explained that now, I hope you understand. It's not 660 hours of work placement. All of the commitment over the 2 years to developing these skills, you will easily break 660. You'll easily break 1,000 hours. So I've no problem. I've no worries about you on this. We've never had a student since 2012 when this started who has struggled to hit 330 hours per year. It sounds like a lot now when you see it in a figure, but then do all those maths together of every Saturday class and studying. It is not. It's not unachievable. Okay, moving on a little bit, and we're going to take a coffee break in just a moment, folks. You're going to be given lists of skills or competencies that you must develop in your own time over the 2 years. There's certain categories, as you're going to see after the lunch break, 4 different categories: core, and then 3 elective boxes of categories. The core ones are really property specific. The elective boxes are not. There's time management, management in general, there's development skills, and there's communication skills. You've been told what's the minimum from each box, and we'll go through it after lunch, and I'm going to give you examples for each one. And as I said, we'll do the first one together. You develop these skills in your own time through placement and shadowing, etc., and classes, and then you write up once a month how you develop them. You have to provide documentary evidence, like a photograph of a book cover or a link, to show that you have actually developed it. And when you upload that link, let's say, here's the TED Talks link on YouTube that I watched, we're taking your word that you watched that link. And your discussion will basically say, here's what I learned from that link. And that's how we know in TU Dublin. The skills are called competencies. There's 55 in total and a minimum of 33 to get a bare pass over the 2 years. Evidence can include a document, a link, a photo, a scan, an article. Here's another example. Proof that you respect security of a client's files. A photograph of the key of a locked filing cabinet and the key hanging out of the filing cabinet is proof that you can lock a filing cabinet. A screenshot of your computer screen asking for a password, not showing your password, that's proof that you respect GDPR. So the evidence doesn't have to be rocket science. It can be as simple as that. But there has to be at least one piece of evidence per competency. If you submit a competency and there's no attachment or evidence link, it's automatically rejected by our system, and you haven't got that competency. So you have to have one piece of evidence. You don't have to have any more than that, but one unique piece of evidence labeled correctly, linked to that competency, as you'll see after lunch. So if you don't provide evidence, it's lost. The competency is lost. You haven't claimed it. It doesn't even get to me for grading. No matter how many competencies you claim per month, you make one entry per month starting the end of October, not September. One entry per month in Student Diary Pro. In Student Diary Pro, there is this text box that you fill in the information to. You write it up in Microsoft Word throughout the month, and then before the deadline, which is always near the end of the month, you fill it in to to Student Diary Pro. You copy it in and you just change around some of the formatting. But you enter to Student Diary Pro once. It's a diary entry, one diary entry per month, even if there's 4, 5, 6 competencies. They just all follow each other, as I'll show you later on. The deadline is, unless you're advised otherwise, always 1 minute to midnight on the last day of the month. If you miss that deadline, you lose the marks. There is no deadline for September. There's a bigger one due at the end of October for everything you develop in September and October. Your first deadline is due to be around the 31st October, unless you're told otherwise, and we have to still confirm these deadlines. It's usually 23:59, a minute to midnight, on the last day of October, the last day of November, December, January, February, March, and April. 7 entries to develop the skills. Sometimes there is a little bit of an early submission, usually in December before Christmas, and usually as well because one of them you need to present, usually in March you need to present, so maybe you submit a little bit earlier in February. All of that will be advised the month before. Again, I have to confirm all that with TU Dublin, but that's how it worked the last couple of years, 1 minute to midnight. How do you submit? Whatever's on Student Diary Pro, as of the stroke of midnight on the last day of the month, automatically gets sent for grading. You don't have to actually click submit on Student Diary Pro. You do for other assignments, for other lectures. But in Student Diary Pro, you build it for over the whole month, or you write it in Microsoft Word, which is advisable. Keep a copy of Microsoft Word, and then you actually put it into Student Diary Pro. You write up your discussions under certain headings, you attach evidence, and then each month, crucially, this is important, and I know there's a question in the chat around that, each month you claim per month how many hours it took you to develop those competencies. 7 entries starting end of October, End of November, December, January, February, March, April, 7 months, 7 entries, 330 hours minimum. You should aim for a claiming of about 50 hours per month developing the skills and competencies. Once again, remember, you're already in class 7-8 hours every Saturday. Over a month, that's 30 hours. So you claim that you spent at least 50 hours per month, around 50 hours per month. That will hit 350 hours after 7 entries on average. Some months you may spend 70 hours. Let's say January, where you're studying for exams. Other months, because it's a shorter month and busy at Christmas, you may only spend 30 hours in December. So it balances out. You self-certify and self-declare the number of hours by simply entering a number between 0 and 100 in a text box on Student Diary Pro to go with your discussion, as I'll show you when we do the Student Diary Pro training next week. 1 entry per month, doesn't matter the number of competencies. As the mentor, you'll get a lot of emails via Moodle mail from me. You'll roll your eyes at the amount of emails and how detailed they are to start, fair warning. And it's a running joke when I see the students at graduation. I'd say to you, are you going to miss those long emails from me? But that's in place of having, when I see them on campus, sorry, that's in place of having extra classes. These will be very frequent throughout September and October, and then they'll reduce to about twice, maybe 3 times per month. But you'll probably get 2 a week over the next few weeks from me. Read them carefully. The deadline for monthly submissions is always a minute to midnight on the last day of the month, unless you're told otherwise. You must always start working on the work earlier on the month. We're going to start on a competency today after lunch, as I said. Before I end the recording and we take our coffee break, it's mandatory attendance at the next lectures next week, because we're going to set all of this up, including training on Student Diary Pro. They set the scene for everything, and we'll have a full workshop on how to actually record your entries in Student Diary Pro. While I show it to you virtually in our class this afternoon, you're actually going to do it in the lab on Tala campus next Saturday. So you're at a severe disadvantage if you miss that. Do not miss that. All lectures and content for critical skills will also be delivered today, next Friday and Saturday, and missing that is a huge issue, guys, and will lead to failure. Next Friday, it's going to be the technology workshop primarily from 4 to 6, as I said, but you're required to attend from 6 to 10, and that is online on Teams. Next Saturday, ignore that. That's today's plan, actually, not next Saturday. And after we have a coffee break, we're going to outline Moodle. The full training of that will be next week. I'm going to outline Student Diary Pro, again, the full training next week. And we'll run a full test on all IT services next week when you're fully enrolled. Finally, before we have our coffee break and you go off and digest all this, as you might have imagined, there's a lot of information for you to take in the first day. If you think, that's easy, that's grand, it's a breeze, there's something wrong with you. You should be a little bit panicked, like anything new, like any new course. It is completely normal to feel overwhelmed. If you're not feeling overwhelmed, then you're brilliant, you're wonderful, you've already got 5 degrees or something. You should feel a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of information we're throwing at you, like anything new. But I promise you, because I've been running this now 11 years, it gets easier week on week. The newness of it can be a little scary, like when you saw 660 hours. But now I think you realize it's actually achievable just by doing what I explained there. Please take time to read everything, digest it, and don't panic. Reach out to us. Ask any questions. I'll set time aside later today and again next week, where you can have one-on-ones even. Everything will become clearer over the next weeks, especially after today's class, when you see the competencies for professional practice, next Friday's class, and the next Saturday technology setup. And you're hearing about Student Diary Pro and Moodle, but when you actually physically get to use it next Saturday in class, in the computer lab on Tala campus, it'll become a lot clearer. So please don't panic. Everything will become easier, and we're here to support you along the way. Students generally do quite well in this module, professional practice, once they get to grips with it. And I'm there to guide you through the first ones. And if you make an error, Don't worry. There's 7 submissions over 7 months. You have opportunities to recorrect things as well. So there's very difficult, okay, let me be honest, it's difficult to fail this module once you engage with what's required. It's not difficult in terms of the content of it, it is time consuming. And all your other pressures of life and work and other course pressures will get in the way. And that's where people have difficulties. And anybody who has failed it in the past is by not engaging and missing deadlines, for example. Content-wise, it is not difficult, as you'll see after lunch when we list the 55, competencies. I'm about to stop the recording, and then I'll take any quick questions before coffee.